What if I told you that everything you've believed about the Native Americans of North America is just a beautiful myth, one that's far from reality? We're used to the classic image from the movies, endless prairies, dust kicking up from the hooves of mustangs, and Lakota tribes organizing their massive migrations over vast distances. But the real story hides something far more intriguing and dangerous. The fact is that while some were conquering the flat plains, a completely different culture was developing in the impenetrable, dense forests and on the deadly steep slopes of the Appalachians. Survival in these wild conditions required not just endurance, but truly phenomenal knowledge of the complex mountain terrain, where the forest became a hostile environment and visibility was sometimes limited to literally 3 meters. Be sure to watch this video all the way through, because today we'll reveal secrets you won't learn in regular history classes. You'll discover how harsh mountainous isolation shaped a unique, almost superhuman set of skills. We'll take a detailed look at exactly what allowed the Cherokee not just to survive, but to thrive and effectively gather resources in places where outsiders and even other tribes couldn't even take a couple of steps. I promise, these facts will completely turn your perception of indigenous peoples upside down. Get comfortable and let's get started. Are you ready to learn the truth about why the Appalachians became a veritable stronghold for one of North America's most resourceful peoples? The Great Plains offered endless horizons where vast expanses could be traversed without visible physical obstacles or hidden barriers. The mountain ranges in the eastern part of the continent, however, formed an extremely complex labyrinth of deep canyons, sheer cliffs, and impenetrable forests. This terrain dictated entirely different conditions for foraging for necessary resources, completely ruling out the possibility of prolonged, open pursuit across flat terrain. The indigenous people of these lands viewed such obstacles not as a hostile environment, but as reliable protection and the foundation of their daily livelihood. Rocky scree slopes and deep crevices required the development of unique methods of movement that differed radically from ordinary running across the steppe. Each route was planned with the slightest changes in elevation in mind to conserve energy during long treks across high mountain passes. The ground in the mountains is rarely flat. It constantly alternates between slippery clay, sharp rocks, and soft moss. These terrain features force travelers to constantly watch their step, analyzing each section of ground before shifting their body weight onto it. A misjudgment of the terrain could lead to a fall, which was highly undesirable in a self-sufficient survival situation far from settlements. Using high ground provided an undeniable tactical advantage for observing the surrounding areas and narrow mountain passes. From the top of a cliff, one could survey an entire valley while remaining completely invisible to those below. In open areas, setting up a concealed observation post required enormous effort, as any silhouette stood out clearly against the sky. The mountains naturally provided thousands of ready-made hiding places among piles of rocks and giant trunks of old trees toppled by the wind. This made it possible to spot any movement below in advance and plan one's actions long before making direct visual contact with the target. The energy expended to move through the mountains was many times greater than the effort required to cover a similar distance across the flat steppe. Constant ascents while carrying a load demanded incredible endurance, powerful lungs, and strong legs accustomed to enormous daily exertion. Plains tribes relied on the mobility of the entire camp, quickly moving their tents and belongings in pursuit of migrating resources. In the mountains, however, base settlements remained stationary in sheltered valleys, while small, highly mobile groups set out in search of resources. This logistical approach allowed for the efficient use of scarce transportation routes without overburdening narrow trails with large numbers of people and heavy loads. This eliminated the need for long treks into other climatic zones, as the inhabitants of the Great Plains often did. Everything needed to make tools, durable clothing, and sturdy dwellings was within a few days' journey of the main settlement. The ability to identify these microzones and harness their potential was the foundation of a sustainable way of life in a complex and rugged mountain range. The fragmented terrain also helped create natural boundaries between different communities, significantly reducing the likelihood of accidental encounters. Crossing a high mountain range was a serious undertaking, requiring extensive preparation, so spheres of influence were clearly defined by nature itself. On the plains, borders were highly arbitrary and constantly shifting, requiring continuous patrolling across the boundless, open expanses. In the mountains, it was sufficient to control a few key passes to ensure the complete security of the entire controlled valley and its riches. This geographical isolation allowed for the development of unique local traditions and hunting methods, free from constant external influence. Such specialization made the indigenous inhabitants of these dense forests true masters of their craft, far surpassing any competitors from the plains. We'd love to hear your perspective. What do you think about this kind of influence that geography has on the skills of an entire people? Share your thoughts in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. What we found in the old archives completely changes our understanding of how people moved through the forested mountains of the Appalachians. Moving across flat, grassy terrain required excellent cardiovascular endurance, but climbing rocky scree slopes engaged entirely different muscle groups. Masters of mountain craftsmanship developed a special, gentle gait that allowed them to tread absolutely silently over slippery rocks and a thick layer of fallen leaves. Each step was calculated with mathematical precision so as not to disturb the natural silence of the ancient forest or accidentally reveal their invisible presence. This vertical mobility became the primary and most important distinction between their tactics and the swift but straightforward movement of the inhabitants of the boundless steppes. The technique of placing one's foot in the mountains differed radically from walking on level ground, where the foot is planted firmly and confidently. In the forest, each step began with a gentle touch of the ground with the outer edge of the foot, after which the weight rolled smoothly onto the entire sole. This allowed one to sense dry twigs or sharp stones hidden beneath dry leaves before the full weight of the body was transferred onto them. This method required immense tension in the calf muscles, but guaranteed near total silence when moving through dense underbrush. On the plain, such precautions were unnecessary, as the soft ground and thick grass naturally muffled most sounds. Trees and dense thickets served not only as reliable cover, but also as vital footholds during steep ascents. Sturdy roots protruding from the ground acted as natural steps, greatly facilitating progress across sections of the slope washed out by rain. The travelers learned to unerringly determine which branches were safe to grab onto and which would snap under the weight of a human body. This constant physical interaction with the vegetation made the process of moving resemble a complex acrobatic discipline requiring coordination of all limbs. In the vast steppe, the absence of trees made such a technique impossible, forcing them to rely solely on the strength of their legs and a steady walking pace. However, during this time, they managed to cross 2 deep gorges, ford a raging river, and climb a rocky pass. This low absolute speed was offset by high stealth and the impossibility of tracking their route from above. On the plains, the main indicator of success was precisely the speed at which they covered enormous distances in the shortest possible time. Carrying harvested resources over vertical terrain also required the use of specially designed devices and straps. The load was distributed so that the center of gravity was as close to the back as possible, without disrupting the person's delicate balance. Wide head straps were used to transfer part of the enormous load from the weary shoulders to the strong neck muscles. This system made it possible to carry loads significantly heavier than those that could be carried in ordinary shoulder bags. On flat terrain, loads were often transported using sleds pulled by horses, which was absolutely impossible in the mountains. Endurance training for mountain crossings began not with running, but with long walks over rough terrain while carrying heavy ballast. The body adapted to the constant lack of oxygen at high altitudes and learned to use internal energy reserves efficiently. Specific muscles in the foot and ankle developed, capable of withstanding prolonged lateral stress on uneven and slippery rocks. Mastering this art required many years of continuous practical training on the most unpredictable and challenging terrain. Those who failed to master this specific science of balance and stealth could not hope to succeed far from civilization. These skills shaped a unique culture of extreme caution, where every route was planned with a multitude of minute natural factors in mind. Do you agree? In the next chapter, you'll learn how they navigated this incredibly dense vegetation to achieve complete camouflage. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about is that the dense forest was the most perfect tool for invisibility. The canopies of centuries-old oaks, chestnuts, and hickory trees formed a nearly continuous canopy that not only concealed any movement from above, but also created a unique microclimate. Under these conditions, visual contact was extremely limited, and often the target or pursuer was only detected at a distance of a few meters. The inhabitants of the Great Plains relied on keen eyesight, capable of detecting movement many kilometers before direct physical contact. In the Appalachians, however, sight took a back seat, giving way to hearing, smell, and the ability to literally blend into the sea of greenery. Dense undergrowth served as a natural screen behind which an entire group of people could be concealed without the use of artificial cover. Fern fronds, tall mountain grasses, and dense shrubs created a multi-layered optical barrier that distorted silhouettes and colors. To become invisible, all one had to do was stand still against the backdrop of a suitable bush, letting the play of light and shadow do the rest. On the open plain, camouflage required special costumes or the use of natural terrain features, which were often simply not available. The forest, however, provided ideal camouflage that varied depending on the season and the density of the surrounding vegetation. The play of shadows beneath the tree canopies was a crucial element of camouflage, actively used to conceal any movement. Direct rays of sunlight filtered through the foliage in sparse patches, creating a mottled and unpredictable pattern on the forest floor. The travelers learned to move exclusively in deep shadows, avoiding brightly lit areas where their movements would be easily detected. This shadow step technique required constant analysis of the lighting conditions and the ability to anticipate how the light would change in a few minutes. In the open steppe, shade could only be found in deep ravines, which made such tactics completely impractical. The use of natural dyes for clothing was also dictated by the need to blend in with the rich color palette of the mountain forest. Walnut bark, berry juice, and various clays were used to give fabrics and leather deep shades of brown, green, and grey. These muted tones blended perfectly with the colors of tree trunks, moss-covered rocks, and last year's foliage carpeting the ground. Clothing worn on the plains was often adorned with bright elements and light-colored leather, since over vast distances, small details would blend into the background anyway. In the forest, however, any bright element acted as a beacon, instantly drawing unwanted and dangerous attention. Fallen trees served not only as cover, but also as excellent routes for stealthy movement over the rustling forest floor. Walking along the long trunk of an old oak allowed one to cover dozens of meters completely silently, leaving no clear tracks on the damp ground. These natural bridges connected various sections of rugged terrain, allowing them to avoid the densest and most impassable thickets of thorny shrubs. The ability to quickly find and use such paths significantly increased the group's mobility in heavily rugged, forested terrain. The inhabitants of treeless plains were deprived of such an opportunity, relying solely on the strength of their own legs and the endurance of their horses. This fundamental difference in visibility shaped entirely different psychological profiles of the people of the plains and the people of the forest. The inhabitants of open spaces were accustomed to relying on their eyesight and felt uncomfortable in the confined space of dense trees. The mountain dwellers, on the other hand, felt uneasy in open terrain where they could not use their skills of stealth. For them, the forest was a protective cloak, a cozy and safe home where they kept watch over every rustle and every shadow. This fostered a deep attachment to their territory and a reluctance to leave the sheltering canopy of the ancient trees. Their experience of survival in such conditions had accumulated over centuries, evolving into a complex set of rules and unspoken laws of movement. Every tree, every bush, and every contour of the terrain was viewed exclusively through the lens of its camouflage potential. This art of blending into nature made them the true masters of the forested mountains. capable of appearing out of nowhere and vanishing into thin air. Be sure to like this video if you're interested in such a profound and unconventional approach to survival. What if everything you were taught about the harsh climate of the plains fails to account for the treachery of mountain weather? The weather in the Appalachian Mountains was incredibly unpredictable, capable of ruining any plans in just a few short minutes. A clear, sunny morning could suddenly give way to a thick veil of impenetrable fog or a powerful, cold downpour. Storms on the plains were visible from afar, allowing people to prepare in advance for the onslaught of the elements, find shelter, or reinforce their temporary dwellings. In the mountains, however, bad weather would often sweep in from behind the nearest ridge completely unexpectedly, requiring an immediate response and perfect knowledge of the terrain. The thick fogs that regularly filled the deep valleys were among the most dangerous and challenging weather phenomena in these parts. The white mist could linger for several days, completely depriving travelers of the ability to navigate by sight, even in familiar territory. Unlike the flat steppe, where the snow was compacted by the winds, in the forest it remained loose and deep, greatly slowing their progress. To navigate such sections, special snowshoes were made from flexible branches, distributing a person's weight over a larger area. This made it possible to maintain communication between settlements, even during the harshest winter months, when the mountains seemed completely impassable. The constant dampness in the deep gorges was yet another invisible enemy against which they had to wage a continuous and persistent struggle. Moisture seeped everywhere, soaking clothes, spoiling supplies, and making building a fire a true test of skill. On the windswept plains, items dried much faster, sparing the nomadic tribes the problem of chronic and dangerous dampness. The mountain dwellers used special waterproofing methods, impregnating leather goods with fat and resin to retain body heat. The ability to find dry kindling in a thoroughly soaked forest was valued incredibly highly and passed down as a most precious secret. Using natural rock shelters during sudden storms was the only reliable way to weather the fury of the elements. Overhanging cliffs and dry caves provided protection not only from torrential rain, but also from falling trees uprooted by the wind. On the steppe, the only refuge from a hurricane was a securely anchored tipi, which, nevertheless, could be destroyed by a strong gust. The mountains, on the other hand, provided monumental shelter capable of withstanding any storm, provided you knew where to find it. Maps of these safe havens were kept strictly secret, guaranteeing safety only to those who had thoroughly explored their region. The mountain climate also dictated strict deadlines for gathering certain types of resources and safely storing them for the winter. The short summer in the Highlands required a maximum concentration of effort to gather wild fruits, nuts, and medicinal roots. If the timing was missed, sudden frosts could destroy the entire harvest, condemning the settlement to a cold and hungry winter. On the southern plains, the harvesting season was longer, allowing for minor delays and enabling efforts to be spread out over time. These harsh climatic conditions fostered iron discipline and incredible organization within each small mountain community. Combating the mountain cold required the efficient use of fuel, which was always abundant in the forest, unlike on the steppes. However, building a large fire would give away the camp's location, so preference was given to small, smokeless hearths dug into the ground. Dry oak branches provided a steady, even heat, allowing people to warm themselves and cook food with minimal risk of detection. On the plains, they often had to resort to using dry bison manure due to the complete lack of suitable, high-quality firewood. The mountain forest provided warmth in abundance, but required wisdom and caution in its daily and safe use. This harsh and unpredictable climate forged people of exceptional fortitude, capable of enduring any hardship without a single complaint. The mountains showed no mercy for weakness, laziness, or recklessness, punishing any disregard for safety rules mercilessly. Under such conditions, only the most prepared, attentive, and respectful of the power of the majestic nature surrounding them survived. Do you agree? In the next chapter, you'll learn how they managed to locate resources in this challenging terrain. Unlike the endless plains, where resources were spread across vast territories, the mountains presented a completely different picture. In the Appalachians, all natural resources were concentrated in small, strictly defined locations, depending on elevation and humidity. Wild raspberry thickets might cover only one specific slope, and a certain type of medicinal root grew only in deep shade. This required not constant wandering in search of food, but the creation of a highly detailed mental map of all the surrounding ravines. Knowing where and when a specific resource ripened was the key to a life of plenty in a rugged landscape. The search for necessary materials often turned into a purposeful expedition to a location that was known in advance but difficult to reach. Instead of combing through vast areas at random, groups would head directly toward a specific oak grove or chestnut forest. A broken branch at a certain height, displaced moss on a rock, or a disturbed spiderweb told them a whole story. On the Great Plains, tracks in the soft mud near watering holes or in tall grass were much easier to read and could be spotted from greater distances. A mountain tracker had to possess truly deductive reasoning, piecing together a picture from barely noticeable, scattered details. Taking advantage of altitudinal zonation allowed them to extend the harvesting season for certain plants by several precious weeks. Spring arrived in the deep valleys much earlier than on the snow-capped peaks of the high mountain ranges. This made it possible to gather fresh shoots first at the bottom and then gradually work one's way up the slope as the snow receded. On flat plains, the season changed simultaneously across vast areas, making such a step-by-step approach to foraging impossible. Understanding these subtle seasonal shifts gave mountain dwellers an undeniable advantage in providing their settlements with supplies. The stone resources needed for tool making were also found in strictly defined and often hidden locations. Deposits of high-quality flint or quartz were known and carefully guarded by the community against any encroachment by neighbors. Quarrying stone in the mountains was easier, as the terrain itself exposed the necessary rock types on steep slopes and in deep ravines. On the plains, the search for suitable stone often required lengthy expeditions to distant mountains or a complex system of exchange. Having their own high-quality materials for making tools made mountain settlements completely self-sufficient. The rational use of discovered sites was the key to long-term survival in isolated valleys. Communities understood that excessive harvesting in a single location could lead to the complete depletion of the resource for many years to come. Knowledge of the locations of all these secret caches was passed down strictly within the family and was considered of the utmost value. The elders taught the younger generation not only what the plant in question looked like, but also how to find the exact ravine where it grew. These maps, stored exclusively in memory, were more complex and detailed than any modern topographical charts. Without this deep knowledge, the mountain forest seemed to an outsider like a frightening and barren thicket, incapable of feeding even a single person. For the locals, however, this forest was a cozy and boundlessly rich home, generously sharing its secrets. The specific location of resources completely determined the sedentary or semi-sedentary way of life of the Appalachian mountain tribes. They had no need to wander endlessly across the world, as their mountains provided everything necessary for a comfortable life. Their primary task was not to find new lands, but to thoroughly explore and protect every square meter of their native valley. This deep connection to a specific territory set them apart fundamentally from the eternal wanderers of the boundless Great Plains. I discovered this by chance while studying ancient artifacts. The shape and size of tools depended on the density of the surrounding forest. In the dense thickets of the Appalachians, using long spears or cumbersome bows was physically impossible and extremely inconvenient. A long shaft would constantly snag on branches, creating unnecessary noise and hindering quick aiming in confined spaces. Therefore, mountain craftsmen created relatively short but incredibly powerful bows, ideal for shooting offhand. In the open spaces of the plains, long bows and massive spears were the norm, as there were no obstacles to their use. A short mountain bow required immense physical strength to draw, but it provided incredible arrow velocity over short distances. In the forest, targets were rarely more than 20 paces away, so range took a back seat to penetrating power and maneuverability. With such a weapon, one could easily turn around in dense underbrush and fire from any position. even the most awkward one. Plains hunters could afford to take their time aiming at a distant target, using a smooth and measured shooting technique. In the mountains, fractions of a second were decisive, time in which one had to spot the target, pull the taut bowstring, and fire an accurate shot. Traps and snares played a much greater role in the forest than any weapon requiring a person's direct presence. Setting up complex mechanisms along animal trails allowed for passive resource gathering, saving a tremendous amount of time and effort. The dense forest perfectly concealed any intricate tangles of ropes and flexible branches, making the traps completely invisible in the twilight. On the plains, setting hidden snares was difficult due to the lack of trees and natural narrow passages in the terrain. In the Appalachians, however, every ravine or stream crossing provided ready-made locations for setting reliable and effective snares. Hunting tactics in the mountains differed radically from large-scale operations on the plains, which involved hundreds of people. In the forest, the hunt was conducted by small groups that used natural obstacles to direct the prey in the desired direction. Thin darts, often coated with plant-based poisons, easily pierced through the foliage without deviating from their intended trajectory. On the windy expanses of the prairies, blowguns were completely useless as gusts of wind blew the light projectiles off course. In windless mountain valleys, this weapon demonstrated remarkable effectiveness and deadly accuracy in the hands of a skilled hunter. The system of communication during the hunt was also adapted to conditions of poor visibility and the need to remain silent. Instead of loud shouts or broad gestures, they used sounds that imitated the voices of forest creatures or the tapping of a woodpecker. These code signals blended seamlessly into the forest's natural background noise, arousing no suspicion among outsiders. On the plains, it was possible to use sign language or signal mirrors to transmit information over vast distances. In the mountains, visual contact was lost at the very first bend in the trail, making sound imitation the only reliable means of communication. The difference in the distance at which one interacted with the world shaped entirely different approaches to the design of material culture. Objects from the plains were large-scale, designed for use in open spaces without constraints. Mountain artifacts were compact, durable, and completely devoid of protruding parts that might snag on bushes. This was a triumph of ergonomics and minimalism over bulkiness, dictated solely by the harsh rules of the dense forest. Do you agree with these conclusions? In the next chapter, you'll learn how the safety of their territory shaped their daily habits. The mountainous terrain itself served as the most reliable fortress wall, protecting the valleys from any unexpected external incursions. Each settlement was situated so that its approaches could be easily monitored by just a few experienced lookouts. Narrow canyons and steep mountain passes became insurmountable obstacles for any large group unfamiliar with the safe and hidden trails. On the Great Plains, a camp could be attacked from any direction, requiring constant surveillance in all directions over vast distances. In the Appalachians, it was enough to block just a couple of natural passes to guarantee the absolute safety of the entire community. The echo in the mountains was a faithful ally to the defenders, as any careless sound would bounce off the stone walls many times over. The sound of a falling rock or a snapped branch would carry through the gorge, warning the locals of the approach of uninvited guests. Travelers unaccustomed to the acoustics of mountain valleys often gave themselves away long before they reached the settlement's borders. The locals, however, knew how to move so that the sound of their footsteps was absorbed by the soft ground and did not echo off the rocks. In open spaces, sound dissipated quickly, providing no such reliable system of early acoustic warning. Hidden settlements in dead-end gorges remained invisible until a person came right up to them. The lack of direct lines of sight and the dense forest reliably concealed the smoke from the campfires, which dissipated into the treetops. From a bird's-eye view, the valley appeared completely deserted, concealing hundreds of comfortable dwellings beneath its green canopy. On the plains, the tipis stood in the open, demonstrating the tribe's strength and size, since it was physically impossible to hide a large camp. The mountain dwellers, on the other hand, relied on stealth, preferring to remain a myth to those who did not know the exact path to their cozy homes. Utilizing the high ground gave the defenders an absolute tactical advantage in any potential clash on the trail. The group positioned at the top of the slope controlled the situation, able to use rocks and gravity to their advantage. Attacking up a steep, crumbling slope was sheer madness, doomed to certain failure even with a numerical advantage. Battles on flat ground often boiled down to maneuvering on level terrain, where the winner was whoever was faster or outnumbered the enemy. In the mountains, a single person on a narrow ledge could halt the advance of dozens simply by blocking the only available path upward. Knowledge of the locations of venomous snakes and dangerous insects was also used as a form of passive defense for their sacred territories. Outsiders, unfamiliar with the habits of the local fauna, often fell victim to accidental bites while trying to cut through dense thickets. The locals, however, knew exactly which sun-warmed rocks the rattlesnakes used to bask on, and simply gave those areas a wide berth. This natural minefield reliably safeguarded the peace of the valleys, requiring no additional effort or risk on the part of the people. In the open expanses of the prairies, such natural traps were much rarer and less concentrated in any one place. Every waterfall and every turbulent river was viewed as part of a unified defensive system, protecting the interior borders. Destroying or concealing the only reliable crossing through a gorge could delay the advance of enemies for many days. This fostered incredible resilience and a willingness to defend their borders, drawing on the full arsenal of knowledge about the forest accumulated over centuries. On the Great Plains, tribes easily shifted their nomadic territories without becoming as deeply attached to specific landscapes as the mountain people did. The Appalachians were not merely a place of residence, they were an integral part of survival, a stone shield and a green cloak. Thus, safety in the mountains was not achieved through numerical superiority or the construction of complex artificial fortifications. It was built on a profound understanding of nature, the use of the terrain's features, and the ability to remain completely invisible in the dense forest. This philosophy of stealth and harmony with a challenging environment made mountain communities virtually invulnerable to external threats. The trail system in the Appalachians was an extremely complex and extensive infrastructure, invisible to the untrained eye. These were not wide roads trampled by thousands of hooves, but thin, barely noticeable threads connecting key points in the mountainous terrain. They were laid out with optimal gradients in mind, avoiding the steepest sections and dangerous, crumbling rocky slopes. On the Great Plains, routes often ran in a straight line, connecting water sources by the shortest and most logical path. In the mountains, however, the geometry of the path was dictated by the whims of geology, forcing the trails to wind like snakes along the slopes of deep gorges. The secrecy of these routes was maintained deliberately to prevent their use by outsiders or unwanted guests from neighboring valleys. A trail often did not begin in the most obvious place, but was disguised as the bed of a dry stream or hidden behind thick bushes. When crossing open, rocky areas, travelers tried not to leave any tracks so that the path would appear to be interrupted and disappear from view. On the plains, bison trails were visible for many miles, serving as reliable landmarks for anyone traveling across the vast steppe. In the forest, however, the ability to find and read invisible paths was a mark of a true master who had undergone a long school of survival. Crossing watersheds required special knowledge of secret passes, which were not always the lowest points of a mountain range. Often, higher passes, hidden from prying eyes, were chosen to ensure safety and avoid ambushes by strangers. Knowledge of these gateways was a strategic advantage that allowed for control over trade and the flow of information between different tribal groups. On the flat plains, the concept of a watershed was quite arbitrary and did not create such severe logistical bottlenecks for travel. Mountain passes were the keys to entire regions, and control over them determined the status and influence of a particular community. Maintaining these hidden trails in winter was yet another challenging task, requiring constant attention and enormous effort. Snowfalls and frequent avalanches could completely obliterate a familiar route, rendering it impassable until the arrival of warm spring. Landmarks along the trails were placed so that only those who knew exactly what to look for among the trees could spot them. These might be young trees bent in a distinctive way, which continued to grow, pointing the right direction with their twisted trunks, or small pyramids of stones, stacked in the shade of large boulders. where they would not attract the attention of casual passers-by. On the endless plains, landmarks included distinctive hills, solitary trees, or even the arrangement of the stars in the night sky. Forest navigation relied on a system of microsigns created by humans in complete harmony with the natural chaos of the surroundings. False branches were often created off the main trail to lead pursuers into a dead end or toward a dangerous cliff. These decoys looked more well-trodden and logical than the real path, which might suddenly climb steeply up over inconspicuous rocks. Once on such a false trail, outsiders wasted precious time and energy, often finding themselves trapped with no quick way to retreat. On the plains, creating such large-scale illusions was practically impossible due to the excellent visibility across vast open spaces. The mountains, however, encourage cunning and deception, making intellectual superiority more important than physical strength or numerical superiority. To fully understand the uniqueness of mountain adaptation, it is necessary to compare it in detail with the lives of the tribes on the Great Plains. The lives of the Lakota and other prairie peoples revolved around vast open spaces where the horizon was always distant and clear. This shaped a completely different worldview, focused on scale, mobility, and the ability to travel hundreds of miles without stopping. Mountain dwellers, on the other hand, lived in a world bounded by the walls of the nearest canyon, where every square meter had been thoroughly explored. These two parallel universes existed on the same continent, but required diametrically opposed skills for survival and prosperity. On the plains, the main resource and foundation of culture were the vast, constantly migrating herds, which dictated the entire rhythm of the tribe's life. Dependence on their movements made it impossible to establish permanent, monumental settlements or to develop complex, sedentary agriculture. In the mountains, however, every journey was arduous physical labor, constrained by the narrowness of hidden trails and the steepness of high mountain passes. Therefore, mountain tribes preferred to remain in one place, sending only small, well-trained groups out to gather the necessary resources. This difference in logistics shaped entirely different social structures and the distribution of daily responsibilities within the community. Their perception of the weather also differed radically. For the inhabitants of the plains, the wind was a constant companion, bringing information and sense. They knew how to read air currents, predicting changes in the weather and the movement of resources long before they became visible on the horizon. In deep mountain valleys, the wind often became entangled in the tree canopy, creating unpredictable eddies and deceptive currents. Mountain dwellers relied more on reading the land, air humidity, and the behavior of local plants than on the capricious mountain wind. These two different habitats gave rise to entirely different systems for gathering information about the unpredictable world around them. A sense of security on the plains was achieved through control of the horizon and the ability to spot any approaching threat in time. The camp was always positioned to ensure maximum all-around visibility and eliminate the possibility of a surprise attack from cover. In the mountains, safety was guaranteed by invisibility and the use of complex terrain as natural, impregnable fortress walls. A mountain dweller felt safe only when completely hidden from prying eyes by dense foliage and rocks. This difference in psychology determined the choice of sites for building dwellings and the organization of the entire system of daily protection. Comparing these two worlds, it is impossible to say which was more difficult or required greater physical fitness and endurance. Life on the plains was exhausting due to constant migrations, the scorching sun, and the need to keep vast, empty distances under control. Mountain life demanded colossal efforts to overcome gravity, combat dampness, and navigate a dense green labyrinth. Each culture reached the pinnacle of perfection within its specific conditions, developing ideal mechanisms for adapting to its native landscape. This comparison only underscores the incredible diversity of human genius in its quest to exist in harmony with nature. Life amid the rugged terrain of the Appalachians shaped not only unique physical skills, but also a distinct philosophy of life. This philosophy was built on a profound respect for the power of nature and an understanding of one's inseparable connection to the forest ecosystem. The mountains were seen not as an obstacle to be overcome, but as a stern yet just teacher, dictating its immutable laws. Every action, from gathering kindling to blazing a new trail, was carried out with an eye toward preserving the fragile balance in the secluded valley. This caution was not a sign of weakness, but a manifestation of the highest wisdom, ensuring the community's survival for many centuries. The physical condition of the mountain dwellers was a direct reflection of their daily struggle against the harsh and unforgiving terrain. Constant ascents and descents shaped bodies perfectly adapted to prolonged, monotonous exertion in oxygen-deprived conditions. This strength was not ostentatious. It was concealed beneath smooth, economical movements that did not waste a single drop of precious energy. Endurance was valued far more highly than short-term explosive power, since a mountain crossing could last for many days in a row. The body became the perfect tool for navigating the forest, capable of gliding silently through even the most impenetrable thickets. The sustainability of mountain settlements relied on the diversification of resource sources and the ability to wisely allocate supplies throughout the year. Communities did not depend on a single source of sustenance, actively utilizing both the gifts of the forest and the resources of the rivers. This diversity made them less vulnerable to climatic fluctuations or the temporary disappearance of a particular plant species. A sophisticated system of storing provisions in rock caches ensured food security even during the harshest and snowiest winters. The rational use of nature's bounty was the foundation of stability and prosperity amid severe geographical isolation. Isolation also fostered the development of a complex and rich internal culture, largely free from frequent external influence by neighbors. In sheltered valleys, unique crafts, the art of woodcarving, and a complex system of spiritual and social beliefs flourished. The absence of a constant external threat allowed people to devote time not only to survival, but also to creating beauty in everyday objects. This disproves the myth that harsh living conditions inevitably lead to cultural primitivism and a rejection of aesthetics. On the contrary, the Appalachian mountain forests became the cradle of incredibly refined and distinctive traditions that flourished in their green shade. The ability to blend in with nature and remain unseen shaped a particular type of personality, calm, observant, and unhurried. The mountain people preferred to listen rather than speak, analyzing a situation down to the smallest detail before taking any action. Their stealth was not a manifestation of fear, but a conscious tactical choice that ensured maximum safety and effectiveness in the forest. This inner calm helped them endure any hardships and deprivations, maintaining a clear mind and confidence in their own abilities. The forest taught them patience, proving that rushing along a steep and slippery trail inevitably leads to fatal and painful mistakes. The legacy of these skills continues to inspire admiration among modern researchers studying survival methods in extreme and wild conditions. The human ability to adapt to such a complex and multifaceted environment demonstrates the incredible flexibility and potential of our physical bodies. Studying mountain survival tactics reveals new insights into how our ancestors interacted with nature before the age of technology. This knowledge reminds us of the importance of harmony with the world around us and the need to respect the laws dictated by the ancient earth itself. Ultimately, the difference between the plains and the mountains lay not only in physical obstacles, but also in the very essence of survival. The Appalachians demanded that people become part of the forest, blend into it, and accept its harsh but fair rules of the game. Those who were able to do so found a reliable home in these mountains, one that has protected them from all adversities for hundreds of years. Their story is one of the triumph of the human spirit and intellect, which managed to transform stone labyrinths into a source of life and prosperity. Please suggest topics in the comments for future videos that you'd like to see on our channel. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new exciting episodes.